Imagine knowing exactly what your students are learning and exactly which steps you need to take next.
Join us in Down with the Reading Quiz to craft meaningful and productive formative assessments that move away from gotcha moments of basic recall and toward assessing what your students actually can do.
In this 30-minute free masterclass, we'll share 3 powerful assessment keys that work for any novel at any time of the year.
Head to shop.bravenewteaching.com/masterclass to sign up, and we'll also send you a free workbook to keep track of all your notes.
Once again, that's shop.bravenewteaching.com/masterclass to nail formative assessments forever. Well, hello and welcome back to Brave New Teaching. Friends, I just got back from a little stop at a coffee shop nearby. I got a Bianca latte, and let me tell you, it is delicious. It's basically a white mocha, I think. It's just really good. And so I grabbed that. I grabbed an Oreo cream pie, like a homemade Oreo cream pie, and it is just delicious. So good. And I sat down to have this wonderful interview today with Lannette Story. She is an English teacher in Southern Illinois, not too far from St. Louis. And we have been chatting here and there since the beginning of the podcast, pretty much. I mean, I think since like 2021, she's been a wonderful supporter of what Marie and I do here. Definitely a huge supporter of things that I've done over in Muddying Teaching. And I love talking to you guys, and I wish that more of you would just reach out. Like, don't be shy. I've had such a fun time talking to Lannette about her classes and her ideas and what she's wanted to do with her curriculum. And so finally, we got to the point now where she, over last year, over the summer, she finally sat down and revamped her entire curriculum, the whole thing, back to front. And so what I told her the other day was I said, hey, would you sit down with me and talk our listeners through a year? Like, talk them through your year. And so I held her hostage, and I have for you a 2-part episode because it's very long. So we're breaking this up into 2 parts. So part 1 will be today, and we're going to talk basically through semester 1. And semester 1, what she's done with backwards planning, with inquiry, with essential questions, and everything that she has done, she has learned from either an essential question adventure pack or one of our workshops, either dystopia workshop, the memoir workshop, things like that. So she is a student of Brave New Teaching, a student of Muddying Teaching, and she has got all of the examples and experiences to share with you all. So this is the kind of episode where if you're going to listen in the car or listen when you're not sitting down, that's fine. But at some point, you're going to want to make an effort to probably listen to this one by your notes and take some notes. She has got incredible ideas. And again, like, she's offering to you all like a glimpse into her entire school year backwards planned. So this is quite the gift. Lannette, I have to thank you again so much for letting me commandeer your spring break time and having you talk to us in such incredible detail about all the things that you do with your students. And so with that out there, Lannette, a teacher of 12 years, Southern Illinois, crushing it, has taught every single grade level and has so much experience. We are so excited to get this one on the airwaves. So let's cue the music. You're listening to Brave New Teaching, and we are so much more than a podcast.
We give teachers the inspiration, support, and tools to challenge the status quo.
I'm Amanda, and I'm a former English teacher from Illinois.
And I'm Marie, and I'm a teacher from Southern California.
Join us at bravenewteaching.com to find out more about our courses, festivals, and get every episode's show notes.
We're so glad you're here. Enjoy the show.
Gentlemen of the Brave New Teaching podcast, I am here with one of you. One of you is here today joining me. Lannette, say hi to the people.
Hello, people.
Would you care to introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about your teaching life? I gave everyone a little intro all about you, but this is your chance to kind of, let everyone know where you come from, what's your deal, and why you're here chatting with me today.
Sure. So my name's Lannette Story. I'm an English teacher in Belleville, Illinois, which is about 20 minutes outside of St. Louis. And I've been teaching for 12 years, like I said, at the school that I went, the school that I went to, new campus, but same school. And I teach English. And what was the rest you asked me? Because I already forgot.
Tell us about these 12. What have you done in these 12 years at your school?
Well, I did yearbook for like 4 years. And then after that, didn't really do a lot of extracurricular because I had a baby who's going to be 9 soon now. I mean, I've taught freshmen, I've taught seniors, I've taught sophomores, I've taught juniors. I used to do SAT prep practice class, which don't want to do that again. Yeah. And then COVID hit and I can't remember the last 4 years. Really, it feels like a whole blur. But yeah, it's been a good time. I like my job.
Well, how did you find us? How did you find Brave New Teaching?
Ooh, okay. So I got to shout out my friend Ashley Mims, who told me, I specifically remember, it was at a friend's kid's birthday party. We're standing in their backyard. We just survived the first year after COVID and teaching. She teaches with me and she told me about the podcast. And I was like, oh, that sounds familiar. I feel like I've heard that before. And I started listening and I was immediately just obsessed. Like I listened to every single episode. I'd be outside gardening, mowing the lawn, whatever. And I'm like, give me more. Because it just all made sense. And COVID made me kind of hate my job for a little bit. It was just freaking awful. Yeah. And so now there's all these different ideas where you can be creative and the concept of an essential question and making everything connect to an idea that is bigger than the classroom and more important than just the essay and just the book. And I was like, okay, this is the thing, because I needed something different, especially after COVID teaching. And then I was like, okay, I love my job again. Woohoo. And I just got all the workshops and I got, all these like adventure packs from you and all these things. And I'm just like, Amanda, and telling all these people like, well, you should do this and you got to check out her stuff. And have you listened to this podcast? And so I kind of became a little bit obsessed. And this year I revamped all of my units and I've done all your stuff. Like I've added my own things with it, but it's all your stuff. And it has been the smoothest, most cohesive, and I want to say easy, like easy in terms of when you
we know what you mean when you say easy.
Yeah. Like we sat down, like Ashley Mims and I sat down over the summer once a week for almost the entire summer and planned out our first semester of freshman English. And I got to walk into that classroom and I knew exactly what I was doing because we backwards planned. We planned the Sesame Street quizzes. We planned the assessments and it was beautiful. And I'm just like, this is
I think when I hear you say easy, I also hear ease. Like there's a sense of ease that kind of settles over your teaching spirit, if you will. I don't know. I'm feeling all kind of moody today with this rain we're getting, but I think is that an accurate like interpretation of what you mean by easy?
Yeah. It took the stress away. So there was no reason for me to sit at school and obsess over what am I going to do tomorrow? And then am I going to have enough time for this? And how am I going to fit this unit in? Because it was done, it's beautiful.
The decision fatigue, right? Like it's a real fatigue.
Mm-hmm. Makes your brain hurt.
So, yeah, it makes your brain hurt. My brain hurts a lot right now. I had a rough morning, but there will be more on the podcast on that later about why Amanda's brain always hurts. But I not only am just so honored and grateful for all of your wonderful feedback and like drinking the juice. We're so happy to have you on board. But so Lannette and I kind of connected over Facebook a few times. We should have met in person a few months ago, or the summer. Was that the summer? Was that more
August.
Than a few months ago?
Yeah, it was August.
Oh my God, that was way more than a few months ago.
Mm-hmm.
We also share an incredibly, I would hope that our obsession with Sam Hewen's more than your obsession with Brave New Teaching, because let's just say that Outlander is, I don't know, it's an inappropriate amount of love that I have for this series and and I love it so much despite all of the very clear flaws that I also bother me, but they will never bother me to the point where I stop watching.
Never.
I'm really annoyed that they're not going to give us the second half of season 7 until November.
I know, but you know what? I'll just reread the books and I'll just look up Sam's Instagram and my husband bought me a life-size cutout of Sam Hewen dressed in Highlander gear. I can just go, I can stare at that. Yeah, he did.
Your husband is an enabler.
He is an enabler. He put it, it's 6'3". It's the right height. It's quite frightening. Yeah. When you see it out of the corner of your eye, you're like, who's in my house? But he put it in my closet, my walk-in closet. It was for my birthday. So I opened up the closet and there's a life-size Highlander standing in there. But he hangs out in the office now. So, yeah,
as one does. So Sam was on tour. We're on a first name basis, obviously. We all are. Was on tour with his whiskey company, and so Lannette and I were texting because he was going to be in Chicago, and I was unable to go that day. But you actually got to meet Sam Hewen, and I am forever jealous.
I did. And you know what? The one question everybody asked me afterwards: did he smell good? And I was like, I didn't sniff him. I don't know, but his shirt was soft.
Did.
He probably did, but his shirt was very soft.
You touched his shirt.
And he was so nice. And my friend Jackie went with me, and he winked at her. And we just rewatched that video like over and over again. Yeah.
I'm dead inside. I cannot believe that I missed this. I am like so upset.
Well, maybe after Outlander, he'll go on tour again because he's got to do something else after that season's done. Then we'll go find him.
So not so low key, I have been bothering his publisher because I want him on the podcast to talk about his memoirs because his memoirs are really good. And I think especially the one Waypoints is very teachable. I think it would be awesome exercise we talk about memoir already here on the podcast so much. It's a very unique memoir where it's kind of cool. Have you read it yet?
Oh, yeah. I actually listened to the audiobook 3 times because it was just really good. And then he was reading to me, so why not? And my husband and I got to go to Scotland over the summer, and so knowing that we were going to go, I was just listening to him talk about going on, his hike and everything, and then of course, it's just him, so I was just listening. But it's really, really well written. I would totally offer that as a memoir in a unit. I don't think any of my kids would care, but I could sell it.
Of course, but I think what's really cool is the way that he kind of goes back and forth between the present of his hike and like he's kind of having this like life moment crisis of who am I, where am I going, I'm on this hike, he's kind of like reckoning with this like moment in time, but then doing these flashbacks to like his memoir of growing up. The structure is just so cool and interesting, and I feel like I could totally get away with no one knowing that this is entirely fueled by an obsession with Sam and has nothing to do with writing.
My kids might figure it out because I always do like an introduction thing at the beginning, and it's pretty obvious. Like, when what do I like? And so I tell them about the cutout, but then I also have a mouse pad that has the tartan and it says Sassenach. And then I have like 2 lanyards that are tartan. It's pretty. Oh, did I tell you that I dressed up in my Claire outfit to introduce Macbeth?
You did.
I did.
I saw that. Like,
that's right. I sent it to you. Yeah, they'd figure it out. They'd be like, Mrs. Story, you're just doing this because you like him. And I'd be like, no.
I just have the costume. It's fine.
Right. Exactly.
I love that. Okay. So on our plan for our chat today, which will be casual and fun, everyone who's listening, I ambushed Lannette with this interview because I really wanted and I would love to talk to more teachers too about your actual lived experience in the process of going from what you were doing before to essential questioning, inquirying, all of the things in real life. Because, when we were talking before, I thought, man, Marie and I struggle. Like, a podcast is awesome, but it's also very isolating. Like when we record, we're in an echo chamber. We obviously are telling each other what each other wants to hear for the most part, unless Marie's bringing up something weird about some fantasy dragon or whatever. But like for the most part, like we get it and we get each other. And so it's hard to like find where teachers are, like at what point is like the implementation of what we're talking about either going really well or kind of faltering and not clicking and making sense. So I thought that by listeners hearing from you kind of like where you started, what you did, and like what you're non-negotiable, like I'm definitely going to try to do what Amanda and Marie said in this place. And then like the places where you kind of wiggled in your own stuff, like that's kind of what I wanted to do today. So could we kind of walk through your year, like even maybe starting with some of those meetings in the summer? What were you envisioning, and then what happened?
Yeah. So I teach both freshmen and seniors, and they're both gen ed level. And the course that my friend Ashley and I planned out together was the freshman course. She teaches honors though. So whenever we were planning, we were doing about the same thing. We're staying at about the same pace with the units, but she would elevate, the expectations or the whatever skills for her honors kids. So where we started when we were planning is we decided to do a year-long essential question. And we did the one that I used the year before. So like this past school year is when I really jumped in and used all the stuff. Like it was just all essential questions, connected everything. The year before I was kind of trying some things out. Like I was getting used to the Sesame Street quizzes and trying out the year-long question, but it was this year where it all kind of came together. So we used the essential question, how do stories help us understand ourselves and our world? Because literally everything connects back to that. And from there, we had certain units that we have to do. So we used to do a short story unit back in the day. And it's like, that's boring because there's no like cohesiveness. No, I know. And then what started to happen with the short story unit is that we have a lot of feeder schools come into our high school. And some of them started teaching the same things that we were teaching. And it's like, but then you're taking it away. So we had to kind of find new stuff. So we did a dystopian unit first, and we were going to do the essential question of to what extent does dystopia, the genre, reflect what does it reflect?
America.
To
what extent is America dystopia? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then we changed it a little bit to make it a little bit more broad so we can include other places besides America. So it was to what extent does dystopian literature reflect our current world? And so that way we could pull in other things. And how we planned out the unit was every Monday was a Sesame Street quiz. Every Tuesday was a short story. Wednesday was a close read. And then I think it depended on if we were off a day, but we would do a supplemental during the week too, usually on Fridays. But we wanted to work in some homework, but we didn't want to give them a lot of homework, but we want to build up the responsibility. So we would give them something that was nonfiction every single week that connected to whatever we were focusing on for that particular week. So if we gave them, let's say like Harrison Bergeron was the first short story, then we gave them an article about, I think it was like surveillance. I forget what article it was. But then we did the ones who walk away from Omelas, and we gave them a short story about Shein. Did I say it right? Shein?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Shein, the clothing company.
Yes. So then we gave them that because we were talking about desensitization and, to what extent do people have to be harmed in order for you to stop using something. And that really opened their eyes. And
that's so perfect with Omelas.
It was so good. That was Ashley's idea. And then there's a really good documentary, but we couldn't get a hold of it. So maybe next year we'll try to watch the documentary. So we did that for the first probably like 6 weeks, I think we did. And the first couple months of school, there's so much going on. There's like assemblies and there's class meetings and there's
so
days
much interruption.
Oh my gosh. So it felt like, we didn't have as much time with that, but they got to practice the Sesame Street quizzes. And so that went really well. And then for our assessment, for our unit assessment, we had them do 2 Sesame Street quizzes, and we had them do a paragraph writing assignment. That was the other thing we did every week that I forgot, the CER paragraph. So then we were able to focus on the skills. And I think that's the big difference is it's like you say, decentering the text, and you're really focusing on the skills. So it's not what happened in this story, but you're having them practice the skills of analyzing or close reading or synthesis. Like I feel like this year, synthesis is something I always tried to do before. And this year it's like every day. It's so easy to do, to bring everything together the way the units are planned out.
Synthesis is a tricky one for people, I think, because it's not written like in black and white in Common Core, right? Like it kind of comes out of College Board. It comes out of the experience, I think, with AP Lang. It comes out of, AP Lit a little bit, but it's argument, right? Mm-hmm. It's argument, it's claim, it's evidence, it's reasoning, and it's using multiple sources. So it is Common Core, but Common Core doesn't call it synthesis and doesn't give it this own territory. And I've had this conversation a couple times lately, and I've worked with some schools that are struggling with this idea that they feel like every standard warrants almost equal attention on Common Core, which is really frustrating because I don't feel like that's the case. Especially with narrative and informational expository writing, like especially since those standards have not been updated since the age of AI has dawned or COVID. They're all pre all of that. I just feel like even though it's not explicit in Common Core, you can believe me, you can now believe Lannette. Argument is king, period. It is the umbrella that contains all of the standards that the students need the most practice with to be successful. Here, but is that, somewhere in a quote unquote standard somewhere? Not officially.
No, but they're using the other standards though, like they're finding the evidence and they're supporting it. They're coming up with a claim. They're saying what's explicitly and not explicitly in the text. And it all just comes together. And it felt so hard to do before, because I always knew like, well, we can supplement with these articles, or we can supplement with the short story. But then it was like, but how do I do that? And so when you plan it out this way, it's done for you. It's just so much easier.
So that first unit, that first short story unit, what did they do for their assessment? Was it a paper or a seminar?
We didn't do a seminar first. We were going to, well, my plan was to do the seminar kind of like how you do the first 10 days. And do you remember when it was like 130 degrees and everything was melting? Yeah. So we were supposed to do our first practice seminar because they're freshmen. Like, they don't know how to talk to each other very well. No. They need the practice. So I knew it was going to be a hot mess, but it was a hot mess on purpose. And we didn't get to do it because we had to go on a heat schedule. So
heat schedule.
It was a heat. Finally, we didn't for a very long time, and it was very hot. And then we finally were on a heat schedule for those days. So we didn't get to do that. So the first unit for Dystopia was a CER paragraph after they did like 3 practices, and 2 Sesame Street quizzes was their first assessment. Yeah. So synthesis and writing and supporting and evidence and all that good stuff.
Well, and I think what's so, I don't know, revolutionary, but like, even for me, it was like a duh moment. Like, of course, their assessment should look exactly like all the things that we've been doing already. Duh.
Yeah. No, I know.
I don't know why I told myself for years that the summative had to be some kind of grand departure from what we've just been doing. Like, that is like, what? What was I thinking? Like, that is not, no. Why was I doing that?
I think it's because that's how we were taught. We had, our the way English ran for me, it was totally different. It was discussion question based, and it was, I don't even remember half of it, which that's fine. But, that's how it was when I first started teaching too. Like, and then what's funny, it's discussion questions. We didn't discuss them though. It was just like, it was almost like a study guide packet. And then another reason why I like moving away from that and using evidence trackers, which I can get to for the next unit, is that they do it in class. And even if they cheat, because they're going to cheat, they're still pulling evidence and they're still having to analyze it. So the hope is, even if they copy off of a friend, which I hope they don't do, but that they will, they're still processing it and they're still seeing it and they're still making the connections. Whereas like with discussion questions, it's just rote memory. They just, not even rote memory. They just copy is what I mean. They just copy it down. It's not going to stick, so. And
I think that what they have to do with that evidence later on is going to be, right? Like that's where the rubber meets the road anyway. So even if they're copying evidence, that's all well and fine until you have to talk about that comment on that evidence underneath the claim. So
my seniors are learning that right now. And I'm kind of getting off track here, but with their Macbeth and their Othello evidence trackers, it's like, oh, you want to sleep through it? Oh, you think you're just going to copy it? Well, go ahead and show me what you know when you have to do the written assessment, and so they're learning that. Yes.
And I know we've talked about this before too, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows to start. I mean, because kids are skeptical. They're expecting you to derail. They're expecting you to go off on another direction. But when you are like consistent, so like next unit came up, right? You're going to talk to us about it. It was the same thing. It was the same thing again. And all of a sudden they were like, oh, you are going to expect me to do these specific things. Like there are going to be other things that happen, but they start to learn and be trained on what really matters and what you actually care about. That to me, like I could tell when like that light bulb came on in my kids' heads and they realized that I wasn't going to play gotcha. And they realized that like, that's not how this was going to go. And all of a sudden, like their walls came down and they started like, it was a much more dynamic class period. I'm not going to say the homework got better or the reading got better, but the class periods all went better once they started to trust me and believe that I cared about how deep our conversation was and the big picture. That was an amazing moment. So how did the second unit go?
I was good. So this is where Ashley and I deviated because she went with her honors. They did a novel unit and I did Gothic literature because my kids love Gothic literature. So we did Click Clack the Rattle Bag, which I love. Neil Gaiman. Love Neil Gaiman. Mm-hmm. Our central text, though, was Edward Scissorhands. And then we did short stories. So, yeah. So then we did Click Clack the Rattle Bag, and we did your Phantom of the Opera song analysis.
Yeah, buddy.
They loved it. I realized how many kids love musicals in my class. They loved it. And then we did one other short story, and I can't remember what it was. But they love Edward Scissorhands. So then we were looking for those Gothic elements. And so we got to bring in like, mystery, loneliness, isolation, being othered. And the cool thing is that this is all just like real life stuff. That's why those essential questions are so nice, because it's not about the essay and it's not about the book. It's about the things they learn about life that they can apply, to their daily lives. The essential question that we used for that one was, to what extent does Gothic literature capture the truth about humanity? Mm-hmm. That was fun. And
that's a big question to ask freshmen.
Yeah, and they liked it. They did a really good job. Now for that one, we did a Socratic seminar. And awesome. So I used your Socratic seminar from the first 10 days as like a template. And then I gave them more specific questions to answer and focus on. So they had to have that prepared for discussion. And one of them was, who are the real monsters? And they loved talking about that with Edward Scissorhands for sure.
Love it.
Yeah. So that one went really well too. And we repeated the same thing. Every Monday they had a Sesame Street quiz. And then every Wednesday or Thursday they did the paragraph writing with a different prompt. And we did supplementals, and we did like a 3-day study on the movie, and then that culminated in the discussion.
At this point, were you starting to see skill growth, especially in writing? Were you starting to see it yet, or was it still, they were still freshmaning? Where were you seeing that in terms of growth?
The Sesame Street quizzes, for sure, they continue to grow like every unit. At first, they do the surface level stuff, and I would have to tell them all. It didn't matter if I told them as they were taking the quiz or not. But I'd have to remind them. In the moment, I would say, you have to connect these words to the book or to the story. And sometimes they would just connect the words. And I'm like,
yes,
I could give this to a stranger on the street and they could tell me why these 3 words go together, but you have to tell me how does it apply to the movie or whatever. But then with the paragraph writing, freshmen always struggle with the reasoning part. It's just hard for them because it's like a deeper analysis. And so that's the part we would focus on. And in the beginning of the semester, we started off with a more guided structure. So we would give them the claim and say, okay, find 1 or 2 pieces of evidence and then the reasoning. So we kind of took it a section at a time, and then I would start to let go and be like, well, now you need to write the claim. Or sometimes I would give them sentence frames. And then by the time we got to second semester, then they were writing the claims on their own. And were they fantastic all the time? Well, no, but they knew how to do it, so you would see that skill growth over time.
Well, I don't even know if you noticed. I'm sure you did. I'm sure you noticed this, but I love that you did 2 genre units back to back, because that's kind of its own. There was a teacher I worked with. I was at a PD, a few weeks ago in Ohio. And she said, our content area, like we really are more skills and not really too much content. And I said, no way. No way. We are so much content and we are so much skills. I mean, that's why it's difficult. But I think genre for me is, again, a content area that we are responsible for that's also not listed in Common Core as a skill, but understanding how different kinds of genres work is what's going to make them strong in terms of writing and commentary and having these discussions about life and the big picture. So I love that you did 2 genre units back to back, because that was giving them, I think, a writing scaffold, because they were starting to learn how to say, like, the author uses this genre, right? The author selected these elements of this genre in order to accomplish a purpose. And both of those genres, by the way, what makes them difficult for those of you who have never taught them is that those 2 genres, the authors are almost always critiquing society, and getting students to get there without spoon feeding it is really hard. That's like master level teacher stuff. But if you can subvert the system like we are, which is basically like really smart scaffolding, really smart layering, kids are going to be successful talking about how an author uses a genre or an element to critique society, because it's not this like left field grab. It's this thing that's been building already in the conversations and everything that you're doing. Were kids, did you find them? How was that for them? I guess I should say.
Like the critiquing society situation. It was different kids got it on different levels. It kind of depended on where they were with understanding theme and message, but they liked talking about it. So for the dystopian one, we picked out 10 dystopian terms from your list, and we would focus on those each week. And so that helped to kind of frame what the story was, what the Sesame Street quiz was, and what the paragraph was. And for Gothic literature, I did something kind of similar. We didn't focus as much on the vocabulary for Gothic literature because for dystopian, it's so specific. But I didn't do that on purpose, the scaffolding. Yeah. It just kind of happened.
You're a badass. You're a badass. What this is all about. Yeah.
Well but now that you kind of pointed that out, that is really important. And that probably helped with that growth, that they were doing the same kind of analysis with it. But those two units were a really nice answer to what can replace a short story unit, because you're still working in short stories, but they're connected. They have their own question, and you can easily supplement with other things. Like for the dystopian one, I brought in the Limetown podcast too, which I forgot to mention earlier. So they're getting so many different kinds of stories in different formats, and it keeps it not boring every day, So while the schedule every week is roughly the same kind of pattern, we're doing so many different things that it doesn't feel repetitive.
Not at all. And I think this goes back to your word before. It feels easy, even just thinking about it, like at a distance. Like I feel like if you told me I had a short story dystopia unit to teach come August, I'd be like, cool, I got it. Like, and you just, like you said, you've got a lot of those things. You created that world for yourself, though. So mad kudos to you. So, okay, so Gothic got you through what, like end of October? How far did that get you?
Right about the beginning of November. And then we need to do mythology in the first semester too. So we always do the Odyssey, which I love the Odyssey.
I actually do too.
Yeah, I know a lot of people don't, but I love the Odyssey. So what we did for that one is it kind of did turn into a little bit more of a genre unit than intended. So, okay. So we were planning this unit, Ashley and I, and we're always trying to figure out, like, okay, what skills are we going to work on with this unit? And for the Odyssey, it was kind of difficult because besides characterization and maybe theme, for the Odyssey, it's a little bit different than the other short stories. So I remember I'd asked you for help with an essential question about, like, what is home? Or how home affects identity. So we started with that, and we were working on like kind of connecting it to home. And then as we talked about it, we were kind of worried if kids would be able to kind of understand, Telemachus and Penelope and the connection to home. So we tweaked it a little bit, and instead we used the adversity and trauma, because I have this really cool activity. I think it came from Laura Randazzo, where they figure out if Odysseus had PTSD. And it's like, spoiler, no, totally did. Yeah. And so we kind of focused on that aspect. Like it was, I forget the actual phrasing, but it was something to do with how, it wasn't exactly how you had it worded, but how it impacts or shapes your identity, I think is what it was. And so we did that. And then we used the Amandasante film version as the core text, and then we did close reads of all the important stuff. But we worked on this really, really cool jigsaw that I was so excited about. So we wanted to work on connotation, and we also wanted to point out how crappy the women are treated in Greek mythology. So we started gathering all these Greek myths like Lena and the swan and Danae and the gold and how Perseus was conceived. And we did Medea, Medusa. There were like 7 total. I can't remember all of them. And we found the original like stories or a summary of the original story. And then we found either a retelling. So Circe was one of them, like a retelling of their story to see a different perspective. And a couple of them, we had to find articles that were kind of analyzing. stories. So we split them up into groups, and they were like the expert group, and they had to study the original one for homework. So all the kids got different things for homework that week. Wow. So then we made just like some questions about it. Then they met with their groups, and they got the second reading, and they had to analyze the second reading together, and it was very guided. And then they had to focus on these words that we picked out for them. So, when Zeus pursued or Zeus conquered, like how it's phrased, like how does that change the way we see what he did? It was so fun. And then we put them in their jigsaw groups, like their teaching groups, and they got to teach each other, and then they got to share with the class. And then it was pretty much like, Zeus is terrible. It's like, yes. And they were so taken aback about the swan story. They would just look at me and like, what? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, he did what? I'm like, mm-hmm. And it was the best. It was so fun. And it was a really cool way to work in connotation and to get them to see a different perspective about a story that's told from, ancient Greece and male gaze and that perspective. So
I mean, all the things that we're getting canceled on these days in young adult lit, I mean, there are like literal golden showers happening in Greek mythology. I mean, make you spit out your drink. Yeah. I mean, between Shakespeare and Greek mythology, it's just like a reminder that nobody who is making decisions in education ever read anything, because there's no way any of this stuff should still be on a reading list.
No.
I mean, the ways in which some of these gods were conceived is absolutely horrifying and just disgusting. So, I mean, of course, kids love it because it's made up. But
I was worried that somebody was going to make a golden shower joke. They did not. Well, I was impressed.
Well, because I think because when you give them Greek mythology, they're still intimidated enough to not speak up and like sound stupid, Whereas if it's straightforward and NYA or something, which, by the way, yet to read that story because YA doesn't do that.
No,
YA is much. Anyway, that's another episode. Have you and I ever talked about Natalie Haynes?
No.
I just finished. I'm going to hold this up. Mm-hmm. This is Natalie Haynes' Stone Blind. I just finished it. Have you heard of this story?
I have, but I haven't read that one yet. That is on my list.
She has so many of them. She does, I'm holding this up for you, but I'm going to tell everyone. So she does retellings of Greek myths from the female perspective. And this one is the first one. I have one's called something, 1,000 Ships.
Yeah.
I think that's Penelope's point of view.
Yeah.
From the Odyssey. She's got one for Pandora. She's got a couple, but this one I read straight. I told people to like get out of my way. Like I at one point it was a Sunday night and I told my husband, I said, I'm sorry, but I have to go. Like I'm leaving. I went to this like bar down the road. I was craving some like very German food. It's a German bar. So I ordered like a schnitzel or like something like with a lot of vinegar. I had a beer and I like cranked out this book and I was just like absolutely in love. This is the retelling of Medusa's story. Mm-hmm. And it is compassionate, heartening, beautiful. It makes Perseus look like the chump that he is. Mm-hmm. And there's like a solid, like the last third of the story is told from the head's point of view inside the bag being dragged around by Perseus. And like,
that's awesome.
I mean, we know that the head lives on. We know that, right? He was using, and it's like but her voice doesn't die. Like she's severed from her body. She talks about missing her body. Like there's no way you can fit this into a jigsaw, but I think you would love it.
Oh, I will read it. Did I tell you the book called Medusa by Rosie Hewlett?
Yes, you did. It's also on my TBR.
That one's I read that one. It was like over the summer, I think. And I pulled a section from that. It's because it's like from her perspective from the underworld. It's like, I died and I've been here and it's very much like Me Too inspired. It's like, well, I see everybody, they're telling their story and using their voices. I want to use my voice to tell my story. And the interesting thing about that one is like, it very much humanizes her. It retells the story of her being pregnant and giving birth. And then even how Perseus is there, like it makes him more likable. Like he didn't want to kill her. It made me hate Athena. Athena used to be one of my favorites. And I'm like, oh woman, no, like, nope, no more. But that one's really good. And she is coming out with a new one called Medea, which I love Medea.
My
I
goodness.
love Medea. So that one comes out in the US in September. So
How am I going to keep all of these straight?
I know. So good though.
So good. The way that you treated this, it does feel very genre-esque.
Mm-hmm.
Like you kind of had a 3 stacked genre semester. And I no wonder your kids enjoyed it. No wonder they were having the time of their lives. I mean, I'm sure, again, we're under no illusions that there are, or we're under no, there's no expectation that everything's perfect. That's not what, no one's talking about.
Right.
That.
No.
But you sound happy. That makes kids happy.
Mm-hmm.
And where did things end at the end of that semester?
So for the assessment for that one, we were going to do something written, but it was December and we were very tired. And I was like, Ashley, I can't read anything anymore. So instead, she kind of made this up. We did a 1-pager. I was like, can we just, let's just do a 1-pager. And she's like, oh, beautiful. So we had them do synthesis again, though, because they had to pull from those other Greek myths that they worked on in the jigsaw. They had to give examples of things that Odysseus went through. They had to answer the essential question in the border. And it went really well. And so it was like a nice way to end it because it felt very chill. And I think it maybe felt easier because they got to color and stuff. But I love visual things. I love 1-pagers. And so then it made it more exciting to grade as well. And then easier to grade because I also got to watch them kind of put it together. So I could walk around and kind of see how they were doing, remind them to use their checklist, make sure you have everything that you need. So that's how we kind of wrapped up that unit. And then at the end of the semester, we had them do a project where they answered the year-long essential question.
Yay!
Yes. And so I had them save all their stuff. I was like, okay, I know they're going to need access to this stuff because I do stuff on paper. Very rarely are assignments like actually turned in on Google Classroom. I like paper. And so after every single unit, I would have them do a folder dump. And I had a manila folder and I kept it in the room in a crate for each class period. And I was like, this is your folder. We're going to keep it here. You will need access to these things later. I know you're going to trash it or carry it around and you don't need to. So they had to get their folder back out, go through all their stuff. We talked about the question, how do stories help us understand ourselves and our world? And we made a graphic organizer where they had to work with each genre. So they had to go back to dystopia and they had to say, how can dystopia, those stories help us understand ourselves and our world? How can Gothic literature and how can mythology? And so then they did a slides presentation and they had to put it together. They had very clear guidelines about what to put and everything so it was basically kind of like an essay, but not an essay. It's the same structure. And they had to record audio using Screencastify. And now Google Slides has its own thing where you can record. And they had to record it and it had to be like 3-ish minutes and they turned it in and boom, there you go. That's what we did.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
And how easy was that for them? Not easy. With ease, as a student to know that you're being evaluated on what you actually did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that these 3 genres, this is my first time hearing this all the way through. And I love it because what keeps coming up in my head I keep having these overlapping thoughts, right? Like all 3 of these genres are cautionary tales.
Mm-hmm.
All of them.
Mm-hmm.
All of them contain warnings. All of them show us extremes of human behavior that are, hyperbolized versions of, like a projected reality. And I just, without the kind of planning that you guys did over the summer, this doesn't just happen by accident.
No.
So I'm so happy to hear that it made sense to you and like you're seeing the fruits of that labor.
Oh yeah. And I think it showed them. And I think it showed them too. It's like, no, you really have to do the things because depending on what experiences they had before, and these kids were 7th grade when COVID happened, it could have been very easy where I just write some stuff, turn it in, and I get 10 points. And don't get me wrong, there's times when they do like some classwork assignments and I'm like, completion, because I just want you to learn stuff. I don't have to like close read everything that you write, but that they actually have to connect things and they have to save things, and that in the end you have to show me what you learned. And so now with second semester being about halfway over, you can see that they get it more and see more growth in that. And they're also seeing connections back to things like, this is kind of getting ahead of the game, but we're doing the Rudisill Petty's unit with, which is more powerful, hope or fear. And we're bringing in a lot of dystopian wording.
Yes.
Yeah. So they're seeing the connection there, which is kind of cool.
That was really loud. I just saw like my mic just like spiked on that.
You're excited.
Yes. I'm going to back up for that one. Totally though. Oh my gosh. That's so exciting.
Yes.
Well, friends, I hope that you left the middle part of this very, very long interview feeling inspired and excited. This is just the first semester that we've tackled so far in this part 1 of this interview. So make sure that you join us next week for part 2, and we will take a look at semester 2 for Lannette. And in semester 2, she's tackling Romeo and Juliet and a Rudisill Petty's unit. It's amazing. Her work is incredible. She also has some ideas for a final assessment, a summative assessment for the end of the year. So all of that is coming next week in part 2. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you next week. Thanks again for listening to Brave New Teaching.
We'd love to keep the conversation going over on Instagram.
And while you're there, check out the links in our bio for the most up-to-date events going on in the Brave New Teaching community.
Thanks for being here and have a great week at school.